a blessing to welcome on a coach that I have tremendous respect for. I've had countless guys that he's coached before. I've had many of his former staff members on the show before, and to have the opportunity now to actually interview him and Coach Chris Holtmann, DePaul's new head coach, is a blessing. So with that being said, I'm excited to welcome on Chris Holtmann. How you doing today, Coach?
I'm doing great, Zach. I'm doing great. Sorry about the delay, but I'm doing great. Chicago is amazing this time of year, as you know. It's about 73 degrees here at about 7 o'clock at night. So it's a beautiful, been a beautiful summer here in Chicago.
Oh, I got to get into this transition, though, for yourself, because it has to have been a little bit crazy. You talk about going into an entirely new environment. You have to move a family, which I don't think a lot of people always talk about, to an entirely new state. Then you're going to hop in and build an entire roster. You have recruiting going on. You're building a coaching staff. Does things start to feel like they're settling down a little bit for yourself now, though?
They do. It takes a minute. You mentioned that. I think when you have, I have a 14-year-old daughter. She factored significantly into this decision because I didn't want to go two different schools throughout her high school. She's starting high school. So
Okay.
moving, whenever you're a coach and you transition, we did it when we went from Butler to Ohio State, it's the kids who kind of take it. They're leaving their friends, so you're worried about your family transitioning them in a way that they're going to be comfortable. But now that I've been here throughout, the better part of 4 months, and my family's now been here for about a month and a half, it is starting very much to feel like home. We bought a house right by campus. DePaul's campus is located in Lincoln Park, and people who know Chicago know Lincoln Park. It's got the campus is in a perfect place. It's got very much a neighborhood feel. It's a really, really beautiful part of Chicago, Lincoln Park is.
So obviously, then this is a different change of scenery for yourself. Then how much more are you enjoying it? Is about the same as it was living out there in Ohio, or what's the differences in that aspect?
I've loved all the stops. I found like Columbus, great city. I was at Ohio State for 7 years. I was the head coach at Butler for 3 years. Indianapolis was incredible. It's a different journey, a different challenge. And I think, Zach, the biggest thing for me in really taking this job was embracing the challenge that we knew this was going to be, and I'm excited about the challenge. Our staff and players are excited about the challenge of trying to be a part of returning DePaul to relevancy in college basketball.
And that's what I really want to get into with you, because when you took this job, you're heading into a conference now that, it's pretty much, in my opinion, a battle between, you talk Big 12, Big East. It's two just stacked conferences, top to bottom. Big East, I think, just in terms of coaches, top to bottom, there's not really many weaknesses there. It's a loaded conference. And this has been a program that obviously has, to put it not nicely, obviously, it's been a little rough for the past couple of years. And it's been a little bit at the bottom of the Big East. Deciding for you to say, you know what, this is an opportunity that I see potential, and I see something that I could get this program to being back up there with some of the top teams in the Big East. What kind of motivated you, and what kind of inspired you maybe even to want to pursue that?
I think it was just that. It was really what you mentioned. I'm familiar with the Big East. The coaching is phenomenal. It's inarguably a top three league in the country every year. It's always among the top three. It is, I think, a league. 4 of the last 8 national champions have come from the Big East, and DePaul in particular. I think I had an AD who's really, really hungry. That was exciting for me to be at a school where I knew they were going to be highly invested in the basketball program's success. And, I was fortunate in my career to have 8 out of 8 straight NCAA tournament teams for a period, really until the last 2 years. And that's what everybody's shooting for, right? Is getting there and then advancing and then making a run. And, we're the longest tenured. DePaul's the longest tenured program among high major programs to not play in the NCAA tournament. It's been 20 years. But those, that follow college basketball remember how great it was in the 80s and 90s. Now that the kids today don't remember that clearly, obviously. But I think it's a new era, as we all know, in college athletics, and I think it's going to take some time to completely change. I think the way this program is viewed, but I'm really confident that we're going to be able to get there, Zach.
You mentioned an aspect that I think is really critical because knowing a lot of the recruits that go through the whole high school process now, the transfer portal, I know for historical wise, a lot of guys back in the day were probably like, "Hey, I like these blue bloods. I like these schools that have history." Nowadays, it's a lot more so what happened in the past year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, and
Yep.
I think that kind of makes a lot more sense too. Obviously, the coach is the one that's going to help you get to the next step. The program where they're at right now. How then do you establish, make DePaul a program that say, you know what, I'm trying to recruit you. It may not have any current present success, but this is my vision. This is how I want to help you guys be able to take this program to the next level.
It helps when you're talking to recruits. The fact that I've been the head coach and we've had successful teams and programs. I also, it helps when, I had 6 NBA players in the last 7 years. So being able to say, okay, hey, we've seen guys, and it's a great credit to them. I've coached guys that have made it after 4 years of college. I've had a couple, I had back-to-back one and dones at Ohio State, which was kind of hard on us as a program, but really good for them. We
Hmm.
had other guys who we had an EJ Liddell who was 3 years at Ohio State, then got drafted. So I think to be able to really communicate, hey, this has been our plan, our developmental plan. We've done it. We've done it a variety of ways with a number of guys that have been able to reach their dreams of playing in the NBA. And here's the path that we believe we can best help you. And that's really our conversation, as well as the idea of, hey, come help a program that, has a lot of tradition be special again. And we know that's not going to be easy and it's not going to happen overnight, but come help a program be special again. And, one of the things we're going to tap into, I believe this is, you know, all the players from Chicago and the suburbs, the city and the suburbs, who might at one point go play somewhere else, to be able to have them back for their last couple years is going to be something we're going to continue to tap into.
I think that's huge because Illinois as a whole, but specifically, to Chicago, there is a lot of talent that comes out of there from the high school ranks. You could recruit a lot of big time players there. How big of that a factor was that for yourself when you kind of evaluating the job aspect and the landscape? You're talking about obviously you're talking about finances, you're talking about obviously
Yep.
family, you talk about these different landscapes and whatnot. How big is the fact that you're going to be the hometown team in Chicago where you have a lot of great talent in there locally?
It was definitely a factor. I think what gets forgotten about is not just the city but the suburbs.
Hmm.
There's been some players and people who who follow Illinois basketball know, like, there's been some players, really good players in the city that might leave and go to prep school somewhere else. That happens everywhere. That's really happened. That happens in every state, in every area, and
Hmm.
it happens here. What I think but the depth of talent in the suburbs up and down the state of Illinois, also the bordering states here, that you can really tap into. Wisconsin has had a great depth of talent, and just the states around Illinois, Indiana has been able to provide really good players, and I'm really excited about where recruiting's at for us right now, and I'm excited about coaching this first group here that we have.
So I got to ask you this transition period because we kind of talked about how hectic it was from the beginning, but I want to go through the past few months of building this roster and everything because you obviously part ways with Ohio State. 1 month, almost to the day later, you're hired as the head coach at DePaul. That means all those transitions starts to happen and everything. So I want to go through that first month though, because you've had such a great career so far. You might have had the opportunity to sit a year and kind of say, you know what, I want to kind of take a little bit of a break, reevaluate, whatever. But you hop right back into it. So walk us through the whole process there, that whole month time span from the time of Ohio State to DePaul. What was going through your mind? What options were on the table? And what led you to the decision to say, you know what, let's get right back after and go to DePaul?
I was talking to my agent a lot, Zach, trying to determine what I wanted the next step to be. My lean was always take a year off,
Hmm.
and I had begun some general conversations with some media groups about doing that for a year, like a lot of coaches do. That was my lean. I talked to, um, search firms that knew the business, asked their opinion. And to be honest with you, a lot of people said, hey, you know, catch your breath, maybe consider taking a year off. Um, it could be really beneficial. The thing that was important to me was my daughter starting high school. And I said, Zach, I said, if there's something that I come across where it just speaks to me, like it just, and it didn't necessarily matter the level. I talked to kind of high mid major programs that reached out, as well as some good high major programs that reached out. And some I was, hey, their guy. Others I was on a really short list. Um, my conversations with DePaul, they really started the more I talked to Dwayne Peavy, who was at Kentucky with Coach Cal. Um, I just started to really kind of fall in love with the idea of trying to do something here that hadn't been done. And, I have my fair share of friends and people who I trust in the media who looked at me, cross-eyed a little bit and cautioned me. But I understood where they were coming from. But I do believe in what this program can be. And ultimately, it was, you know, it was a really easy decision for me once I came to grips with the fact that DePaul was probably the place.
So that decision comes to play. You decide to become the new head coach at DePaul, and then you look at the roster and you decide and you say, okay, well, now I got to get to work and I've got to build an entire roster that's ready to compete in just a 6, 7, 8 month span now, and I got to build my coaching staff. How did you just kind of build this whole thing out? Just walk us through those steps.
Yeah, so it was my first hire first couple of hires were really important, as you know. They're all important, but I knew that we were going to have to get, DePaul was 3-29 last year, so I knew just by the nature of the season that was right. You're going to have massive turnover. And then when you get into a program, keep in mind you're living in a hotel, right? When you get a job, you are jumping into it. You are living in a hotel. I had my hotel suite, then I had a living area where we had a whiteboard set up, where we had our roster, where it was currently, what it was currently, what we saw it could be evolving in. We had another list of all the transfers. So for me, I had to get kind of boots on the ground with a couple assistants. That was Jack Owens, who worked with Matt Painter at Purdue and was a head coach at Miami of Ohio, um, who was with me at Ohio State. He was with me at the press conference. We got to work right away. Brian Mullins, who was the head coach at Southern Illinois, has done a terrific job. Both those guys are excellent coaches. And then a young guy who could handle all of the transactions going on in the transfer portal, who could be my kind of analytics / recruiting coordinator in Tyler Hicks. And we just went to work. The four of us just went to work. And then I obviously added to our staff in the coming weeks. But we needed kind of the four of us to jump in there early to put what we thought could be most of our roster. It ended up being we needed to put our whole roster together.
Mm-hmm. So I do want to ask this question though, because I like asking, kind of picking guys' brains, is that when you got to go through this whole NIL process and everything going on in today's game, would you say the new changes, because of how much more open the portal is, the NIL, all this stuff, does it make it easier to hop into a job now and be able to build a team quicker or more successfully quicker? Or would you say it's more difficult, about the same? How would you say the differences are?
I think the results, you can impact the results quicker, Zach.
Mm-hmm.
I think the overall change in the actual program, the really significant changes take time.
Yeah.
How the program is viewed, the consistency of performance that happen. Do I think that the transfer portal can allow a better results in a shorter period of time? I do, but I think the real significant changes that have long-term benefits in terms of building a program that has great stability and consistency of success, those always take time. they took time 10 years ago. They continue to take time because you're changing the overall impression and you're changing the mindset in and around the program, and that takes time.
All right, so you talk about this new culture essentially that you're trying to build then. Is it the same as what you've done throughout your entire career, or would you say there's a new culture you're trying to build? And regardless of what that answer is, then the second part to that would be, what is that culture you want to build? What is it that when that locker room talks about, if I were to ask all those guys, like, what's the culture that you're trying to build right now at DePaul?
Our best teams, I talked about having those 8 straight NCAA tournament teams, and in most cases, we were a single digit seed. I think our Sweet 16 Butler team was maybe a 4 or 5 seed. We were a 2 seed one year at Ohio State, but other years we were 4 or 5. A couple years we were double figure seeds. So my point in all that is what was consistent with a lot of those teams was they were generally older,
Mm-hmm.
which is, we know that to be true. Sometimes peppered in with my 21, 22 NCAA tournament team at Ohio State had a really impactful freshman in Malachi Branham, but it was led by a lot of older guys on the roster. EJ Liddell, Kyle Young's, just some older guys, Jamari Wheeler. But I think for me, I think continuing with a blend of having a consistently mature team is what we'll be looking for, as well as adding some impact young players. And then, our teams, typically our best teams had great diversity offensively. We had versatile pieces across the front line that I think that was probably not as evident the last couple years, and that's something we're trying to get back to.
So I want to go through this roster a little bit because, from my opinion at least, you have had probably one of the more underrated eyes for talent because you talk about so many guys you've developed. As you said, you have the cool combination where you have those young guys that are freshmen one and dones. You've also got guys to the NBA who stayed in college for a couple of years, and you were able to identify because not a lot of these guys were the number 1 or 2, 3 ranked player coming out of high school. And so I think you've honestly been really underrated in regards to how people look at talent evaluators. And now you're taking over this DePaul roster, and there's a few guys on this roster that I'm already high on. I think Leighton Walker has a shot to be a really good player in the future. Also, like the CJ Gunn addition, a few others as well. But when you're looking at these guys and you say you got to take everything you're trying to do to build this offense, the defense, these guys fit together. How did you put this whole team together, and what were you looking for specifically in these guys?
Yeah, we were really looking, Zach, for skill shooting. For me, I identify with competitive and tough kids, so I was looking for that along with skill and shooting. Um, so we were just, that was our focus. I wanted competitive and tough guys, and I wanted skill and shooting. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted some versatility along the front line, some mobility, some versatility, ability to shoot. David Skogman shot 40+% from three as a 6'10" and a half center at Davidson. That was important for us. Um, so we wanted to add a group, and I think we've added a group that has that ability. There's no question you don't get all the answers in year one in terms of putting your roster together. There's some things we've got to continue to get better. I do think, to your point, we made some upside decisions on some guys. Can we take them now, and can they develop here and become really good players in our program? And I think we have some young guys.
Mm.
Young, I'm talking, sophomores, some younger guys that can really grow into those roles. And I think that's what you're looking for. We were also put a premium on multi-year transfers because, Zach, all the studies that show, and I've said this before, Evan Manaya's study on how to build a roster is really insightful for coaches because it's backed by real data, and the
Mm-hmm.
data suggests that for teams to be consistently successful, and when you're building a roster, um, having guys that are in your program that are old but have been in your program for multiple years, there's great value in that. And for us, we tried to really identify multi-year transfers.
So I have to imagine it's a little bit of an interesting dynamic because when you have this whole new roster that doesn't have any history together, everyone's trying to figure each other out when they get to practice and they start trying to scrimmage each other and whatnot. And you have to have certain guys have to start emerging and become the leaders of it. It's not like a situation where you have a few guys come in, it's already leaders established. And so I kind of want to have an idea then, like, when you look at these guys so far, and I know you're going to start more practices in the near future, but who are some guys that you're starting to see as leaders emerging? Whether that be actually not, maybe not even necessarily saying the best player overall, but just guys that are starting to really show up as leaders within that locker room.
For me, I always focus on the point guard position first, as a lot of
Mm-hmm.
us do. We're going to be led in a lot of ways by our point guard. Connor Enright's an older player. He's got 2 years left, but he's been in college for 3 years, and he played on back-to-back NCAA tournament teams on a really good Drake team. So for me, I think he's going to be really important for us because he's right. He's been there. He's been where we want to be, and he provides toughness on the defensive end, a grittiness to how he plays, can really shoot the ball as well. And you can play him, with a combination of guards. Layden also can play that position. Obviously, Layden Blocker, as you mentioned, who we're really excited about. You can also play those guys together.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are important. And then I think, you know, we have a couple young men. I mentioned David Skogman, and then Isaiah, a young man we recruited from Illinois, Chicago, Isaiah Rivera. He's got a chance, I think, to really provide shooting and scoring. Those two older guys. But you mentioned, a number of guys. You mentioned C.J. Gunn. You mentioned maybe J.J. N.J. Benson's a young guy we're really happy about. We've got him for a couple years. A couple guards that we've got we're excited about. So we're really, excited about this group. But we know, listen, the Big East, as you mentioned, it's no joke. And that's what part of what makes it fun. But we've got a good non-conference schedule, and I'm excited to get him back here in September and get to work.
All right. So when you look at this upcoming season, you obviously have an aspect of looking towards the future. I imagine, what you want to build 2, 3, 4 years down the road. But for this year alone, you're taking over a team that only won 3 games last year. You have obviously anything pretty much I'm pretty sure is going to happen will be an improvement on last year. But what's your goals for this season? Is it, how deep of a tournament run, just get into the tournament, improvement overall wins? Like, how are you kind of evaluating what's the goals for this season alone?
I think, listen, I think for us, I've been asked that. I think it really is going to depend on how we perform as the season goes on. Do you see a competitiveness within our group, both in terms of how we play? You can see that, you can feel that, the energy in which we play with, and obviously how competitive the games are. Are we competing? What do the scores look like? Are we winning games? All those things obviously factor into that. And then, are we growing as the season goes on? Are we growing as a group? Do you see individuals grow? Do you see us grow? I think those are the things that we're really going to look at to point us towards, hey, this has been a really productive year one. Um, this our program. It's, I believe, 19 years in the Big East, and the average wins have been right around, I believe 3.5. So it's a league that has beat us up a little bit, and it's on us right now to bring a competitiveness to how we compete night in, night out.
So you say almost that this first year is a lot of just trying to make sure the culture is established, make sure you guys make your presence known, and kind of establish, we're here to play basketball again, and kind of almost build for the future then?
I mean, what I would say is we're going to compete night in, every night. I mean, we're going to compete night in, night out. As well as I do, you can lose to anybody in
Yep.
college basketball at any time. That's the reality.
Hmm.
You can also beat anybody at any time. That's the beauty of it as well. So for us, I'm optimistic about this group. But as you know, I think any coach would be crazy right now if he's going to throw out a number as to how many games he's going to win or lose or whatever. Our
Hmm.
goal right now is just to stay focused on, honestly, improvement and getting better every day. With that, I know the results will come.
Absolutely. Well, I want people to get to know you a little bit too and your history a little bit. So I kind of want to talk about some of your past as well. So the first thing I want to go is I know there was a big change in your life about year and a half ago, and that's regarding your health overall. I know had a few different posts on Instagram about that. I kind of want to ask about that aspect. So what motivated you? Obviously, being in a situation where you're seeing guys and athletes and the best shape people in the world work out day in, day out. What motivated you though to make that change to now kind of overall change your entire health life?
I tell you, Zach, you know, this job, as is the case for any highly competitive job, um, it can beat you up, and it can beat you up physically, it can beat you up mentally, it can beat you up spiritually. So I think the foundation of who you are as a person um, is really important for you to do these jobs as well as you can do them. And I think for me, there was a period of time where I just let the physical part of my life go. And what I needed to do was challenge myself to be as disciplined as I could physically. Working out to me right now is really, really important. There isn't a day that doesn't begin for me without some type of physical activity.
Mm.
For me, I need that. It's become a vital part of me becoming hopefully the best version I can be as a coach, as well as a husband and father, and a teammate to my other coaches, and everything that's required. So yeah, I was at my worst weight 2 years ago. Blood work came back, wasn't great. I wasn't diabetic, but I was probably headed down that path pretty quickly,
Mhm.
and I made some life changes. But it began with regular, consistent exercise. And again, I think the people who do this job really well, they have great discipline in those areas that they value the most:
Mhm.
their family life, their spiritual life, their physical and social lives, how they value their friendships, how they take care of themselves. Those are the guys that seem to have longevity in this business and do it really well.
I think it's a huge thing because you talk about the discipline aspect, and I know in pretty much any aspect of career, that's obviously critical just to go through life, regardless of what career path you're going down. But when you talk about the discipline aspect, how much would you say the working out and whatnot has improved you so that you could be able to go through the ups and downs of a college season, get you through this the aspect of just knowing that? 'Cause I think just when you work out, you get that physical, almost that
You do.
mentality just kind of shifts a lot more for yourself. Would you say you've seen that, or how would you say you've seen that now impact your day to day life as a coach and just throughout life in general?
Well, I mean, I think those around me would say, you know, uh, it's helped immensely. I mean, it was a difficult, just because we weren't quite experiencing the same level of success the last 2 years, so it was a real challenge emotionally. And I think being able to be in a place where I could get myself physically um, better certainly helped me. It also, gives me great energy to perform a job that's required to have really, really high energy. And
Mhm.
it's one of the things that I feel like in jumping into this rebuild, one of the things that's allowed me to jump into it absolutely diving in head first, has been the kind of the physical condition I was, being able to work long hours and being able to jump back in, and do all the requirements. So I had no concern about, I'm a relatively young guy, although my players all think I'm old, but I'm a relatively young guy by most standards. But the physical element of just demands of the job, like it's important. You got to take care of yourself, and I would say that to any coach, really at any age. And if you can start at an early age to take care of yourself and implement those daily disciplines in your life, it'll serve you well.
All right, so I went back because 4 years ago I had an interview where, at that point in time, your entire coaching staff came on the show, and I did an interview with them. It was Coach Ryan Peden, you had Coach Diebler on them, all of them, and I kind of went back and listened to what they talked about you back then. And so some of the quotes that they talked to you about was that you're one of the hardest working people they've ever known, that you've always keep it authentic, you're always real genuine, you keep it real, as Coach Diebler said, and that you develop relationship with players better than anybody they've been around. That's what Coach Diebler also said. So I want to ask you about those things because obviously, when you hear what other people say about you, obviously, kind of is the reflection of what people look at you as and kind of perceive you as. So take us through those aspects. What about you, A, helps you kind of develop those relationships with players? Like, why is that such a big aspect, and how have you developed that skill? And then also just the mindset to always keep it 100, keep it real, and be a hardworking person.
Well, I do think players can spot a fraud, and they can spot. They're smart. Kids are smart. They know, um, they know if you're being genuine with them or if you're not. And I just think in life, man, it's really serves you well if you can be genuine and real. And that's what I've tried to do throughout my coaching tenure. I think the thing with players nowadays, it's so different. I didn't care to have a relationship with my head coach when I played, Zach. It just
Mhm.
wasn't important to me. um, I don't think you can be the very best version of yourself as a program without, you know there has to be a degree of relationship, personal relationship. And it's something I'm constantly working on doing as well as I can do, because sometimes you can get so caught up in the work that you forget um, the human behind what you're trying to do. And I think that's easy for all of us as coaches. Players are not a means to an end. you know our job as coaches is to serve our players as well as we can, and to challenge. Part of serving them is challenging them to be the best versions of themselves. But if this comes off as an endeavor that is consistently about me, them achieving a means to an end for my own gain, I don't think that. I just don't believe in that philosophy, and I don't think ultimately that's going to be um, fulfilling for me or for them. So it doesn't mean that we're not going to hold kids accountable. We absolutely are. There's going to be a challenging element to it. But at the end of the day, the investment in a player is going to be really critical for us.
All right, so you said an interesting part, and I think that when we go back and we look at old school coaches to today's coaches, there is that little bit of a difference. Obviously we still see some coaches that keep the old school philosophies in today, and obviously I'm more so referring to like Phil Knight's type of coaching styles and whatnot. And now you have these what people kind of say player coaches in a sense. How would you say just throughout your career so far, you've seen just by generations as they've come and gone, the kind of difference in which those type of kids look for and want, how you have had to kind of alter your coaching styles?
I think it's that. I think it's. I've had to be and learn to be much more just aware of what players may be going through, and the emotions. There's so much more that is thrown on players now. Now, there's some real benefits too to playing in today's era, right? NIL, long
Yeah.
overdue, is a great benefit for players. Um, but there's also tremendous uh, challenges with social media. Not only the pressures of performance, but you get hit in all different directions. You play a poor game, it could have
Hmm.
somebody who bet on the game that you know uh, takes a couple shots at you. So I just think that understanding that there's more. What I would tell you is with players, if a player is performing poorly for a consistent period of time, there's usually more than just the performance that you have to really dive into. It's more layered than that. And I don't think I have always done great with that, but I think I've learned that more and more the longer I've coached. And it's our job as coaches to peel back some of those layers and figure out how we can best help them.
Absolutely. Well, I do want to go all the way back to when you first decided to become a head coach because you were an All American player at Taylor University. You became the GA. Then, right after that, career wrapped up for yourself. But what was it about coaching? Was that something that from the time you were young, you said, you know what, my goal is to be a head coach one day? That's what I want my job to be. Was it something that developed more towards the back end of your playing career? Or when did that actually become the passion for yourself?
My goal was to be the head coach at my alma mater, Taylor University. That was kind of what was important to me.
Hmm.
when I first got started. But I asked I remember talking to my head coach about it at the time, and he said, "Hey, your goal should just be like be the best assistant." At that time, I was a graduate assistant. Be the best graduate assistant at Taylor University you can be. That should be your only focus right now. That doesn't mean you don't have long term aspirations,
Hmm.
but you can't skip the small steps that are really important when you're building a career. So, really for me, but as I got into coaching small college basketball early in my career, I had the desire to coach, what I believe to be the highest level. For me, that was Division One. I said, I just want to be a Division One coach. I want to somehow get a break and be a Division One assistant coach. I didn't play at that level. I had a dear friend, Jeff Meyer, who made a call to the athletic director at Gardner Webb. He made a call to the head coach. Rick Scruggs hired me as an assistant, and that was really the break that I needed. From that point, I was hired by John Gross as an assistant at Ohio, and then back to Gardner Webb as the head coach. So I really had a couple guys give me a break, as everybody needs young in their career, and then you've got to do the work if you're going to sustain longevity in this business. Um, Really, in any capacity, much, but certainly as a head coach, um, you've got to have a foundation of real foundation of competence, um, because they're difficult jobs. These are not easy jobs.
So if somebody would have told you back when you first decided to make the transition to being a GA that you're going to be a head coach one day and you're going to have as much success as you've had. You've already won 3 Coach of the Years in your short career. And like you said, you're still overall pretty young, especially when you look at the coaching ages you can coach till. Was this ever something that you think you could have imagined or dreamed of?
No, not really. No, I'd have never imagined that. I was, blessed. I remember our third in year three at Gardner Webb. We made a run. We won 11 of our last 12, and those guys really deserve that Coach of the Year award because they just, man, it didn't look great in December, and they just in early January, and they took off, won 11 to 12, um, and then at Butler, our third year, kind of same thing. We had a team that really clicked our third year, and went to the Sweet 16. And I never could have imagined, you know, having that title of Big East Coach of the Year. It was such a humbling experience, given all of us who know the history of that league. And then the Big Ten, same thing. Just was a tremendous honor, and I think all of our success as coaches, as much as we look back on it, you really do reflect back and you say, man, the players and staff that I had in those particular years that we were successful, or we reached maybe full potential or close to full potential what we could be. The just the How symbiotic the relationship was across the board between players, staff. Um, those uh, those are some great memories, and they're great reminders about what it takes. Because I think about uh, all of our teams that were tournament teams or that were successful. There was just, in the face of challenges, man, they were just, they were really consistently stayed attached to who we were as a program, and that's a reflection on the coaches and the players.
So I do want to get into another aspect. We talked about your mindset a little bit ago, but something I did want to pick your brain on a little bit was because, from my opinion, I've always been a very, very high on you, and I think that the past couple of years, there was a lot of people bashing you and whatnot online. And when I look over your career, when I evaluate coaches, I look at, do you win games? Can you develop players, develop coaches? And you've always done that. I know obviously maybe it wasn't a national championship or whatnot, but you always had successful teams. You got so many coaches, head coaching opportunities. You got so many players to live out their dreams and play in the NBA one day. And I mean, those are pretty much the biggest things you look for in a coach. And I think that you got a lot of hate that probably was not deserved or maybe wasn't handled the way that it probably should have been towards you. But sometimes, obviously, we can't control what other people say or think about us. And so, for yourself, as you're going through that, and, you probably look at it and say, hey, I'm still getting guys to live out the dreams. I'm still helping guys develop as coaches. Like, I still think I'm doing a successful job, at least to the best of my ability, but yet others aren't necessarily giving me the credit I probably deserve. How do you handle that and deal with that?
You really have to find a group, Zach, of people who you'll listen to, who aren't afraid to tell you if they think you're wrong or doing a poor job, or they can also tell you in difficult times, hey, like hang in there, like you're on the right path. I think you have to find a group of people that you would uh, respect enough to take advice from, and also respect enough to take honest criticism from,
Mhm.
and leave it at that, because the rest of it really doesn't matter. Does it bother us as humans? It certainly does. But the
Mhm.
rest of it ultimately doesn't matter. I'm wise enough to recognize uh, anytime you struggle, are there areas, be it in anything we could have done better the last couple years? Sure. You
Mhm.
always look at those things. Um, uh, but I've got also a group that, I've talked through with all those things. Again, I think you've got to find a group, not that's going to, tell you everything you want to hear, but a group that you're going to be willing to take advice from, and a group that you're going to be willing to take criticism from and take challenging conversations with, and then leave it at that, because the rest ultimately don't matter. We know that this climate that we live in now, and you're in media, this is as much about engagement as anything,
Yep.
and farming and searching for engagement. And while it's it's everybody who's on social media is looking for that to a certain degree, or not everybody, a lot of people.
Mhm.
And coaches can become fodder for some of that. It just comes with the territory. At the end of the day, it has to be find the people that you would take advice from, take criticism from, uh, figure out who that circle is, and really listen to them, um, and kind of ignore the rest.
All right, so I said that one of the things that makes you always a special coach is your ability to identify talent, regardless of what their rank coming out of high school, whatnot. And I mean, just to list some of the guys, you got Malachi Branham, E.J. Liddell, Bryce Sensabaugh, Dwayne Washington. The list goes on with different guys you've coached and identified. What was it about those guys, though? Was any of them, first of all, surprising on how good they became for you or how quickly they became good? And also, there's what was it about them that when you did recruit them, you said, you know what, I think this guy has something special. I want him to be a member of my team.
All those guys. EJ was a two-time Mr. Basketball in Illinois. We know knew he was going to be a phenomenal player. He was a two-time first-team All Big Ten performer, but he struggled he didn't struggle his first year. He just was a freshman growing. He actually had a
Mhm.
pretty good year, but he was just going through normal challenges. I think with Malachi and Bryce, our two one and dones, I did not anticipate them being one and dones. They might have,
Mhm.
because they had great self belief in who they were. Two great workers, uh, really good kids. Um, Malachi benefited early on from playing with an older group. Like when we beat Duke, when they were number one in the country, Malachi had some good moments, but he didn't have the kind of moments that he had later in the year when, um, he kind of took over when we beat Indiana at home. And, so he really took a minute, then came into his own, and I think is going to have a 10 to 15 year NBA career.
Mhm.
Bryce Sensabaugh, totally just a phenomenal scorer of the ball, as gifted as anybody I've coached at scoring the ball, just incredibly gifted at that. We knew that. We just didn't know that those guys were going to take off quite like they did. Um, and it's to their credit. And I think we helped them, sure, but they also deserve a ton of credit for that. EJ worked his rear end off. Dwayne Washington, really worked at his game to become an NBA player, and a guy who was kind of a 3-star coming out of high school, 3-star, 4-star, and ended up leaving after 3 years. Uh, Sean Tate, phenomenal teammate and player with the Rockets now.
Hmm.
Coached him and can guard 5 different positions. Keita Bates-Diop, Big Ten Player of the Year, really grew into his own. Has developed a really nice NBA career, um, and really happy for those guys as well. I just because I think they're all phenomenal kids and great representatives.
So you said that you were a little bit shocked about Bryce and Malcolm, how quickly it was. When was the point then for yourself as a coach that you said, you know what, I think they're both guys that can be one and done guys? When did that start to click in and you start to realize that?
I texted a couple NBA guys 15 practices in of Malachi's freshman year, and I said, "Hey, you probably want to come take a look at him this year." They were already going to,
Hmm.
but I said he does some things in practice. He gets to places with the ball, with the way he moves, that are NBA like. He's just not physically ready to make a real impact at that point. I said, I don't know when he is going to be physically ready. When he is, you're going to have a good feel for him. Bryce, we had moments. I saw moments of him in preseason practice
Hmm.
where I was like, he's so physically gifted at scoring the ball. The way the NBA puts a premium on scoring the ball, now we had just went through a one and done with Malachi. I did not think that was going to be the case with Bryce, but as he started to score the ball so easily at this level, as we were, 10, 12, and that was a tough year because we were so young. Last 2 years I started 4 freshmen and 4 sophomores. So we were just so young his freshman year, and that was hard on him. It was hard on all of us because he probably had to carry too big of a load. But I think pretty early on, you saw with both those guys, they were going to be NBA players. It's just going to be a matter of time.
So I gotta put you on the spot a little bit now because I want to kind of look at your coaching mindset and how you would build a roster. And that's if I were to ask you now that you had to build a starting five and a six-man of all the players you've coached throughout your career that would fit the best together, you think they're ready to go play, you trust them. It might not just be the 5 or 6 top players, but guys that's gonna fit together. Who you got on that roster for yourself?
Oh man, you're going to make me do this, aren't you? You're gonna make me do this. Oh, I, Sean Tate would be on there because he was so uh, versatile defensively and offensively. EJ Liddell would definitely be on there. Um, those guys for sure would be on there just because of their, you know, for a variety of reasons. We talked about Bryce and Malika, how gifted those. At Butler, I had 2 guys, Keelan Martin and
Hmm.
Kamar Baldwin, who were phenomenal players. Both guys. Keelan played in the NBA for a while. Uh, Kamar was a phenomenal talent. It's be hard pressed to pass on any of those guys. I loved coaching Kyle Young, who was kind of a junkyard dog. I'm naming a lot of guys. Keita, I mentioned Keita earlier. Dwayne was so fun to coach. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I just named about 12 guys, and I did that on purpose, Zach. Okay, so I'm leaving somebody out. I know.
Absolutely. Well, I got a couple other questions before I let you go, Coach, and one of that is kind of going back to now the present time, and you look at this upcoming year. We talked about the Big East a little bit, but going into this conference now, where like you said, it's going to be incredible atmosphere after incredible atmosphere. Coaching lineup wise, you're going to be matched up against so many other great coaches, night in and night out. Roster wise, can be great. When you get to the thick of things, it's going to be a tough season overall, and then just how good the Big East will be. What makes you the most excited for that opportunity being in the Big East again?
I think the quality of coaching and playing in this league, top to bottom, it's the best of any league I've ever seen. It's
Mhm.
phenomenal. So I think that's really exciting. Just the quality of coaching. I think our league's going to have a really, really good year this year. I
Mhm.
think we're going to have. We deserved. Even I said that when I was in the Big Ten, the Big East deserved at least a couple more teams in the tournament than what they had last year. I think the league's going to have a great year. I think that's what gets me most excited. I just think from top to bottom, it's going to be a phenomenal league.
Absolutely. Well, the final question I want to wrap up with is something I always like asking everybody to conclude each interview. And that's when the day does come that you decide to walk away from coaching and whatever that's going to look like in the future, what is that you want your legacy to be for what you accomplished on and off the court as a coach?
Obviously, I want people to say, "Hey, he really, really cared about his players. Um, that he cared about them as people. He cared about their success beyond their years that he coached them." Um, I think that would be number one. Number two, I would want people to say, "Hey, he did it with an integrity. That he did it the right way. That there was a way in which he went about the business that spoke to um, who he was as a person." And then I would want people to say he did it well. He coached well. He was um, very he was taught well. He coached well. Um, those would be important things for me to be remembered for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, I appreciate you for coming on today. It was a blessing to be able to talk to you, and I'm so excited to see what God's got in store for you this upcoming year and for as long as you're at DePaul.
Thanks so much, Zach. Great being with you, man. All the best.
Absolutely, Coach. You're always welcome on. God bless.
Thank you.